All right, everyone. Today's session. Thank you all for joining today's session. Express my I must express my gratitude to you all for joining today's session. And we'll be looking at the United Nations Framework Convention the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. So at this point in time, I hope you're hearing me clearly. I want to start by giving the history of the convention in itself, and you can continue to put it in the chat, just in case we want to move on in a sense. So the Law of the Sea developed from the struggle between coastal states who sought to expand their control over marine areas adjacent to their coastlines. By the end of the 18th century, it was understood that states had sovereignty over their territorial sea. The maximum breadth of a territorial sea was generally considered to be 3 miles, the distance that a shore-based cannon could reach, and that a coastal state could therefore control. And this, I gathered this information from the UNEP Grid program, which looks at mostly the continental shelf. So after the Second World War, the international community requested that the United Nations International Law Commission considered codifying the existing laws relating to the oceans. The commission began working towards this in 1949 and prepared 4 draft conventions, which were adopted at the first UN conference on the law of the sea. The first United Nations Conference on the Law of the Sea, they say UNCLOS 1, from February 24 until April 29, 1958, adopted the 4 conventions, which are commonly known as the 1958 Geneva Conventions: the Convention on the Territorial Sea and Contiguous Zone, the Convention on the Ice Seas, the Convention on Fishing and Conservation of Living Resources of the Ice Seas, and the Convention on the Continental Shelf. While considered to be a step forward, the conventions did not establish a maximum breadth of the territorial sea. The second United Nations Conference on the Law of the Sea from March 17 to April 26 did not result in any international agreements. The conference once again failed to fix a uniform breadth for the territorial or establish consensus on sovereign fishing rights. The United Nations Conference on the Law of the Sea from 1973 to 1982 addressed the issues brought up at the previous conferences. And of course, over 160 nations participated in the 90-year convention, which finally came into force on November 4, 1994. 21 years after the first meeting of UNCLOS and 1 year after ratification by the 68 states. The first 68 ratifications were almost all developing countries. And of course, you would understand that, if you do check, or if you do, review a map or so, you'll see that the majority of the developing countries who participated at this point in time, came from, it was more like a concern in terms of, where we're coming from as state, in terms of, colonialism, access to their resources, different countries like to access their resources. And so I think it was very clear that, it came from that perspective. What are some of the features of the convention? A major feature of the convention included the definition of maritime zone, the territorial sea, the contiguous zone, the exclusive economic zone, the continental shelf, the ice sea, the international seabed area, and archipelagic waters. The convention also made provision for the passage of ships, protection of the marine environment, freedom of scientific research, and exploitation of resources. But for me, I'll more than likely look at the main aspect of this discussion, which is the territorial sea, the contiguous zone, the exclusive economic zone, the continental shelf, and of course, somewhat the IC. Of course, this treaty made provision or created its own secretarial authority. Of course, part 1, Article 1, Paragraph 2, or Paragraph 2. Part 1, Article 1, Paragraph 2 of Article 1, in the entire treaty, authority means the International Civil Authority. Of course, Article 158, speaks on the establishment of the UNCLOS, which is the United Nations Convention on Law of the Sea. Article 51, states clearly, hereby establish the International Civil Authority, which shall function in accordance with this part. All state parties are ipso facto members of the authority. The authority is the organization through which state parties shall, in accordance with this part, organize and control activities in the area, particular with a view to administering the resources of the area. The powers and function of the area shall be those expressed conferred upon by the convention. The authority shall have such incidental powers consistent with this convention as are implicit in and necessary for the exercise of those powers and functions with respect to activities in the area. The authority is based on the principle of sovereign equality of all of its members. Article 157, Paragraph 4 is very important in a sense. All members of the authority shall function in good faith to the obligations assumed by them in accordance with this part in order to ensure to all them the rights and benefits resuming its membership, of course, of the International Civil Authority. In summary, they are one of the 16 parties who have somewhat ratified the convention. So there are 169 party, 165 member states, 1 UN observer state, I think it's Palestine, 1 non-member state, I think it's Cook Islands, and a regional bloc, which is European Commission or European Union. The treaty, to verify, the treaty, was adopted in 1982. It lays down a comprehensive regime of law and order in the Royal Ocean and sees establishing rules and governing all uses of the oceans and their resources. That comes from the International Maritime Authority. It was adopted around that time, but after a few years, the ratification and so on take precedence after a while. UNCLOS defines everything from the freedom of navigation to piracy, to pollution, to wildlife conservation, but perhaps more relevant to geography, UNCLOS also delineates maritime political and economic boundaries. In other words, the UNCLOS provides guidance for what exactly are and aren't the aforementioned ICs. According to the UN, the oceans are the common heritage of humankind, and UNCLOS attempts to find a balance between freedom and sovereignty. There are several zones. There are several zones, that we must look into. The first one is inland water. This run from the baseline, inland waters. What are the national economic and political rights? Inland waters are clear. You have complete and sovereignty, complete and sovereign rights in your inland waters. The inland waters, the waters of the landward side of the baseline from which the breadth of the territorial sea is measured. The coastal state has full sovereignty over its internal waters as if they were part of the land territory. Territorial waters. Section 2, Article 3, states every state has the right to establish the breadth of its territorial sea up to a limit not exceeding 12 nautical miles, measured from baselines determined in accordance with this convention. Section 2, Article 5 states clearly, except where otherwise provided in this convention, the normal baseline for measuring the breadth of the Arctics of the territorial sea is the low water line along the coast, as marked on large-scale charts officially recognized by states. What are low line what are low water line? The lowest point on a beach that is reached by the sea at low tide. So floods, tides, and currents. So of course, it's saying that the territorial waters where you measure the territorial water, which is 12 nautical miles. So from anywhere at the beach side where the low tide is, beyond that, that's where you start measuring from, right? So the distance, of course, is 12 nautical miles. And of course, the national economic and political rights. So the sovereign national territory, similar to land-based political boundaries. So the foreign vessels may only enter under certain circumstances. So it's a sovereign territory. So the state has a right over this aspect in their territorial waters, and different vessels and may enter only under certain circumstances. And in some regions, under certain circumstances may be that a United States and other countries in the Caribbean may have some sort of agreement that allows them to go into their territorial waters in certain ways, or in waters that we may go through. Territorial water is different. This is it, the contiguous zone. Section 4, Article 1 makes mention in a zone contiguous to its territorial sea, described as a contiguous zone, the coastal state may exercise the control necessary to 1A, prevent infringement of its customs, fiscal, immigration, or sanitary laws and regulations within its territory or territorial sea, punish infringement of the above laws and regulations committed within its territory or territorial sea. Article 4, Section 4, Article 2 mentions that the contiguous zone may not exceed 24 nautical miles from the baseline. And of course, I've told you what the baseline is. It's close to where the lowline area is, our low water line. Baseline from which the breadth of the territorial sea is measured. In summary, you cannot go. Contiguous zone is not beyond 24 nautical miles. And of course, the national economic and political rights. A country has limited law enforcement jurisdiction to prevent crimes it believes may cross its territorial waters. So it has limited law enforcement. It cannot go out of certain place to say, okay, you're in territorial waters. No, the contiguous zone is a little bit different and a little bit tricky. The exclusive economic zone. Part 5, Article 55 of the Convention of the UNCLOS, say that the exclusive economic zone is an area beyond and adjacent to the territorial sea, subject to the specific legal regime established in this part, under which the rights and jurisdiction of the coastal state and the rights and freedoms of other states are governed by the relevant provisions of this convention. So the distance is a little bit more, is the exclusive economic zone. So it's 200 nautical miles from the baseline, where you actually start. A country as sole, the exclusive economic zone is an area beyond and adjacent to the territorial sea, subject to the specific legal regime established in this part, under which the rights and jurisdiction of the coastal state and the rights and freedoms of the other states are governed by the relevant provisions of this convention. The national, economic, and political rights. A country has sole access to all resources within the EEZ, such as via fishing, mining, and fracking. The IC is one of the most, currently one of the most talked about aspects. You'd have known about recently the biodiversity national jurisdiction, agreement that was launched, that was, somewhat agreed upon by member states. And of course, the IC is anywhere beyond beyond the 200 nautical miles. So in some sense, the country doesn't have any right to this aspect. It's shared by all countries. Freedom of navigation by all vessels, restricted economic activity. And a very important point to note is that in this area, everyone can do what they want to do, but it's also limited in a sense. So the contiguous continental shelf, Part 6, Article 71 of Para 1, The continental shelf of a coastal state comprises the seabed and subsoil of the submarine areas that extend beyond its territorial sea throughout the natural prolongation of its land territory to the outer edge of the continental margin, or to a distance of 200 nautical miles from the baseline from which the breadth of the territorial sea is measured, where the outer edge of the continental shelf margin does not exceed up to that distance. So you can see each time you go, we may start with the inland waters, which states that it's a territory. Then you go to the territorial area, nautical miles. Let me go back a bit. The territorial waters says it doesn't go. It's 12 nautical miles, and then you say clearly the contiguous zone is 24 nautical miles. The question is whether or not they all start from the breadth of the territorial sea. So this is measured may not extend beyond 24 nautical miles from the baseline from which the breadth of the territorial sea is measured. So from the breadth of where the territorial sea is measured, each time you go, you'll notice that it's speaking about you start measuring from here, so you can't measure from there. You measure from here. The continental shelf of a coastal state shall not extend beyond the limits provided for it in paragraph 4 to 6. And because this should be a 10-minute session, if we could go, directly beyond to say, okay, let us go deeper in this. This has a more than that should happen in case a country wants to claim the continental shelf, because it doesn't just claim it easily like that. They'd have to be doing, scientific research, scientific evidence matters, continuous matters. And in doing this thing, they would have to provide, the names of what the commissioners who review what is known as, the continental shelves, to see that there is someone of authority over that area. So it's more complex than what they think. So what are the rights of the state of the coastal state over the continental shelf? The coastal state exercises over the continental shelf sovereign rights for the purpose of exploring it and exploiting its natural resources. The rights referred to in paragraph 1 are exclusive in the sense that if the coastal state does not explore the continental shelf or exploit its natural resources, no one may undertake these activities without the express consent of the coastal state. So it's just simply saying that, if the coastal continental shelf is established, and as we would have established, it is closer to this or the distance to the 200 nautical miles in a sense. If the state does not exploit its continental shelf, if it doesn't do anything there, no other state has the right to go there without the consent of the state itself. So if my state doesn't give you the right, if my state doesn't exploit our continental shelf, then another state cannot go and do it unless there's some other right given. The rights of the coastal state over the continental shelf do not depend on occupation, effective or notional, or any other express proclamation. The natural resources referred to in this part consist of the mineral and other non-living resources of the seabed and subsoil, together with living organisms belonging to sedimentary species. That is to say, organisms which at the harvestable stage either are immobile on or on the seabed or are unable to move except in constant physical contact with the seabed or the subsoil. So it's giving you much more than what is happening. So and of course, the natural resources referred to in this part consists of the mineral and other non-living resources of the seabed and subsoil area, together with living organisms belonging to the sedimentary. So it's speaking about what happens in this area. If a state wants to exploit here, It speaks about the natural resources. What is it that they want to go and dig for? What they can dig for, what they see there, and they must take all these things into consideration so they can exploit these things. And we're finishing up because it should not be long. It should be in like 10 minutes. So an important aspect of this convention, it speaks to other things which I have not been into, is the right of the flag ship state. It speaks about how ships can go pass through your state. It can also speak about something that is important, flag states. It also speaks about war, but a crucial aspect of this is the protection of the marine environment. So necessary measures shall be taken in accordance with this convention with respect to activities in the area to ensure effective protection for the marine environment from harmful effects which may arise from such activities. To this end, the authority, as I said before, is the International Civil Authority, shall adopt appropriate rules, regulations, and procedures for inter-area, the prevention, reduction, God, guys, is anyone hearing? Oh my God.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, we were hearing. Were you hearing me all along?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good. So protection, the territorial. Okay, so you were hearing me all along in terms of the entire presentation, right?
Yes, I was.
Okay, good. So necessary measures shall be taken in accordance with this convention with respect to activities in the area to ensure effective protection for the marine environment from harmful effects which may arise from such activities. To this end, the authorities shall adopt appropriate rules, regulations, and procedures for into the area, the prevention, reduction, and control of pollution and other hazards to the marine environment, including the coastline and of interference with the ecological balance of the marine environment. Particular attention being paid to the need for protection from harmful effects of such activities as drilling, dredging, excavation, disposal of waste, construction, and operation of maintenance of installations, pipelines, and other devices related to such activities. The protection and conservation of natural resources of the area and the prevention of damage to the flora and fauna of the marine environment. And of course, we're coming to an end. The UNCLOS, simply does these things. It protect the territorial integrity of states, protect the marine environment, support economic exploration and scientific research, and of course, it protects marine governance, in a sense, promote marine governance. And these are the references. So I will just stop